Peace and love, you beautiful wonders of the spiritual level of being. Nathan here from a spiritual level of being, and you have a spiritual level of being. And today we're going to be discussing how old were the disciples of Jesus. Now, this is up for speculation. This is controversial. That's the reason I chose to discuss this subject. Now, it's possible, and it's possibly not possible, that the disciples of Jesus were teenagers. They were youngsters, as Jesus referred to them as little children, which is most likely a statement made that he was older than them, as Jesus began his ministry at the age of 30. Now, it was customary for the time for an elder to take on a young boy as a student, as a disciple, or as an apprentice to then carry on their craft. Now, it was customary amongst the Jews in their culture for a young boy at the age of 5 to begin their religious training, and if they were gifted and showed an interest in teaching religion at the age of 12 or 13, they would then follow a rabbi until the age of 30, and from there they were able to take on students themselves. Now, it's most likely that the disciples of Jesus were ages of 13 to 20, 30 being unlikely. Now, there's sources that state that Peter was married, but in these sources of Mark 1.29 and Luke 4.38 and Matthew 8.14, we have the mentioning of Jesus healing Peter's mother-in-law. But the Greek word, the Koine Greek word that was used here, actually just means in-law. It could mean aunt, it could mean mother-in-law, it could mean brother-in-law or sister-in-law. Now, with this, there's no actually speculation describing Peter's wife or actually a mentioning of her or a name in the Bible at all. So this is up for speculation. Now, John, who was said to be the youngest, was said to have lived 60 years after the death of Jesus. So this is mostly mythology in church history, in Catholicism. But this being stated, he must have been quite young to have lived that long, as people did die early on in those ages from disease and from the world in general, like war and famine, etc., persecutions. It was more of a violent place than today, more harsher. Now, it's speculated that maybe Matthew could have been the oldest, or at least the most educated, as he was a tax collector. So this would have to have had an education involving numbers. So we have here of different communities following Jesus as well. So it's hard to trace these steps. Now, let's move on. Now let's read Matthew 4.18. As Jesus walked along the shore of Lake Galilee, he saw two brothers who were fishermen, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew, catching fish in the lake with a net. Now, it's only mentioning here fishermen. Jesus said to them, "Come with me and I will teach you to catch men." At once they left their nets and went with him. So it implies old enough to at least follow a rabbi. Now here, this is where it gets interesting. He went on and saw two other brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee. They were in their boat with their father, Zebedee, getting their nets ready. Jesus called them, and at once they left the boat and their father and went with him. This most likely implies they were young. So, old enough to leave home and follow a rabbi. Now, if their father was really old, and they were much older, it's more than likely they would have been looking after their father. So to leave him alone would have been quite shocking for that time. So it's more than likely they were youngsters old enough to leave home and follow a rabbi, which was Jesus. Now we move on to Matthew 10, the 12 apostles. So Jesus called his 12 disciples together and gave them authority to drive out evil spirits and heal every disease and every sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First Simon, called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James and his brother John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the patriot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. So this could also be symbolic for Jesus making them into men. So these were once boys and now they've become men. They've become men of God. So they're also the children of God. So this implying that they're acting on the will of God. Let's read the same thing, but from Mark 3.13. Then Jesus went up a hill and called to himself the men he wanted. They came to him, and he chose 12, whom he named apostles. I have chosen you to be with me. He told them, I will also send you out to preach, and you will have authority to drive out demons. Now, in another video, I mentioned how the word demon comes from the Greek word daemon, which can mean ancestor spirits, one who tames and conquers, means intelligent one, wise, all-seeing. Now, it could also be referring to ancestor spirits, as I mentioned before as well. Also, emanations of God. So, certain aspects, those spirits. Now, these spirits can also be good and evil, or considered mischievous. These are the 12 he chose. Simon, Jesus gave him the name Peter. James and his brother John, the sons of Zebedee. Jesus gave them the name Boanerges, sorry if I butchered that name, which means men of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Patriot, and Judas Iscariot who betrayed Jesus. So when I mentioned about being symbolic, making them men, as he said, I'll teach you to catch men instead of fish. Now, this here is about bringing spirituality, the message of God. Now, this here is basically gathering a following, making a flock. Now, it was customary for Jews to marry. Now, for women at the age of puberty to the age of 20, now, men usually married around the age of 30. So, it's even suggested that Jesus most likely had a wife, which could have been Mary, as it was unusual for a Jewish rabbi especially to not be married at that time. Now, this goes for the apostles. If they were all in their ages of 30, they would have all most likely been married. So this suggests they were teens. And if we go to the word of Peter's mother-in-law, meaning in-law, this could be anyone. So it's interesting when we actually come across these sources. Now, there is scholarly fields today that even view these disciples as being teenagers and possibly even younger. Some view them as older, as it's up for debate. So it's quite interesting. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. I wish you all a lovely day, a lovely night. Many blessings. Connect to one mind and soul. Namaste.